Donald Trump as a national security counterintelligence question/threat is a years-old question now. Andrew McCabe opened an investigation into Donald Trump when he fired Comey because he could not see to it to let Flynn go. As far as I understand, these questions are never resolved. They were asked once Donald Trump learned they were being asked. He sought to burn it all down, it being the FBI and the Department of Justice. This 39-page indictment presents all of the things that Mike described, someone whose legal problems are all self-inflicted. But to the point Mary's getting to, someone who has always been a national security question, maybe threat to the United States of America.
Yeah, Nicole, I'd go further. I'd say Donald Trump is a counterintelligence nightmare still to this day. You know, it reminds me back when all our kids were toddlers and you have to go on a long car ride and you say, okay, take your little backpack, go to your room, pick 2 toys that you're going to put in there and go on the road with, and you're going to play with it. For Trump, these things are shiny baubles. They are like Shaq's shoe. They are like Mike Tyson's belt. They are something that he has a fascination with. And there are huge national security implications from that. I mean, the fact of the matter is it's not a belt. It is not a shoe. It is something that could put somebody's life at risk. It is something that could disclose the capabilities of a satellite. It is something clearly that what we can tell, a couple of things. One, he took this stuff with him everywhere, it appears. So the chances, in my opinion, are high that there was classified information at Bedminster, that there was classified information at Trump Tower. Who knows whether it was over in Ireland or here in Washington, D.C., but he clearly took this information with him on his little road trip in his backpack, in these boxes, wherever he went. And then the second thing is that, you know, all of those places, it's not just the question of what Trump did with it. The question is whether or not other people, hostile intelligence services, whether that's the Russians, the Chinese, absolutely are targeting not only Mar-a-Lago, but Bedminster and Trump Tower and all these places. So even if Trump didn't want to do anything with those documents, showing them to people, and we know from the indictment it appears he did, at least in the case of the Iran document, that there is a risk simply by taking those outside of controlled space. So that didn't stop, obviously, when he left the presidency, because he kept all those documents. I think there's a very reasonable question about whether or not, even today, the government has back all of the classified information that Trump took with him. And so if I'm in the intelligence community, not only have I been busy doing a risk assessment of all the documents that have been recovered to figure out what needs to be mitigated, I've got this deep, uneasy feeling in the pit of my stomach, wondering what else was taken that I don't have back, that I need to worry about. So it's a question and a threat that hasn't stopped. And, you know, again, frankly, looking at this, I see it as a counterintelligence nightmare.
I mean, Mike, you've done extensive reporting on the counterintelligence questions that were asked about Donald Trump at the beginning of his presidency. How do you see what is charged in this indictment as a continuation of some of the same patterns and practices on Trump's part?
Well, in some ways, I look at it, and I'd be interested in what Pete thinks about this, but it's sort of I'm not sure if it's a next chapter or a bookend, but look, in May of 2017, you know, Andy McCabe and Strzok open up this investigation into whether Donald Trump is a national security threat and obstructing justice. And while the issues in the indictment are different than the issues that they were looking at the time, essentially you could read the indictment as one that is about a threat to national security and obstructing justice. And it sort of pulls the thread through to show what happens when Donald Trump is investigated when he is no longer president of the United States, and he's investigated, by a Justice Department that is not afraid to take him on. Now, would the Justice Department have gotten there on its own had it not, when they opened up those original investigations? I don't know, but I think that something that I always have to sort of remind myself of is that you had a special counsel's office with Jack Smith that really went after this. They weren't listening to anything that Trump had to say. They didn't have a Trump-controlled Justice Department to go through to figure out whether they could subpoena the president of the United States or do any of these other matters. And they really, for lack of a better term, took the gloves off and pierced the inner circle around Trump in a way that we had not seen before to produce an investigation that essentially says, look, this was a threat to national security, and he obstructed justice in the process.
Yeah, I mean, and Pete, I want to let you respond to that, but Jack Smith literally pierced the bubble by going before Judge Beryl Howell and showing that crimes were likely being committed through the attorney-client relationship and had access to everything. I mean, what are your thoughts? What's your reaction to some of the widening of the lens that Mike's talking about?
Well, I think Mike's absolutely right. I mean, look, there are two aspects to when you look at Trump. I mean, there's the criminal component, right? That was like when back in, 17, when the obstruction case was open. What Jack Smith is doing now, what Mueller did, is looking at the criminal aspects of his behavior, whether or not he violated any laws that might, result in charges being brought. But there's a separate national security issue. Now, that's interwoven through some of these crimes, but in many ways, it's separate and distinct from whether or not he fits any element of a particular crime within Title 18. And if you go back and you look just to the early days of all his interactions with Putin, when he stood there in Helsinki and said he had no reason to distrust Putin and valued the opinions of him over those of the U.S. intelligence community, when he had this strange fascination with, what Putin thought with regard to NATO and having meetings with Putin where nobody was present to take notes, when you had the pursuit of all these financial dealings within Moscow by Malcolm Cohen while Trump was saying, I don't have any dealings there, that time and time again, he's meeting in the Oval Office with Sergei Lavrov and Ambassador Kislyak, again, without any U.S. personnel present. There is that concern, separate and distinct from whether or not any laws are being violated, whether or not he is under the thrall, under any sort of coercive leverage on the part of the government of Russia, that is a counterintelligence concern. And I think Mike's absolutely right. I mean, that was the beginning of the Trump presidency. I mean, heck, that came up during his campaign when he made first, the Russia, if you're listening, I hope you find the rest of the emails. He's calling on the government of Russia to engage in activity as that government to help him. And it goes through up until the current date. So I do think there's this national security thread line that is an important component, but different from the criminal things we're seeing from Jack Smith.
Yeah, and I mean, Mary, I'll give you the last word, and I also want to get you on the record on something Andrew Weissman flagged for all of us yesterday, which is this background check process that is now underway, that the Department of Justice has entered a protective order. That'll be part two of your two-part question. But the first is, why does this matter? This matters because Trump didn't commit just any crime. Trump committed the crime of endangering U.S. national security by the willful retention of national defense materials. He didn't commit an unrelated crime to the questions that were being asked about him in 2017. He allegedly committed crimes that go to the heart of what the government worried he was as early as 2017. And that was, as Pete said, a counterintelligence nightmare.
Yeah. And, if you just look at the language of people like Bill Barr, who said, this is really serious. I think he said he's toast if these allegations are true. But the reason somebody like Bill Barr thinks it's so serious is because Bill Barr has sat in those meetings in the Situation Room at the White House, the Situation Room being a sensitive, compartmentalized facility that you can't even bring a phone into because you can't take any risk of any information inside that room being obtained or observed or exfiltrated by any kind of hostile adversary. And so, and you have people like Judge Michael Luttig, former Fourth Circuit judge, very conservative judge, saying any attorney general in modern history would have brought this case. It's because they all realize not just that he was a national security threat. I mean, frankly, he continues to be a national security threat. We can get back documents, and as Pete said, we might not even have all of them back, but we can never get back what's in his head that he could be talking to people about anytime he sees it in his interest.